Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a really intriguing piece here, a draft called Köttrobotar, which translates to meat robots.
Yeah, and that subtitle, How the Digital Consumption Society Destroys Your Well-Being. It doesn't pull any punches, does it?
Not at all. So we're basically looking in the mirror today, aren't we? Examining our own consumption habits in this, well, this digital
And
age.
you might hear meat robots and think, hang on, that's not me.
Right. But the author, Emil Isaacson, he makes a pretty strong case that, well, we're all kind of swimming in this consumption society, whether we realize it fully or not.
So our mission today really is to pull out the main arguments from this text.
Yeah, understand what he sees as driving this consumerism, and maybe, just maybe, find some useful nuggets for, I don't know, living a bit more consciously.
And it starts right at the beginning, doesn't he? With this big idea.
He does. That even with smartphones and AI and everything, our fundamental evolutionary programming, it doesn't really change much since we were nomadic hunter-gatherers.
It's such a fascinating starting point, that deep history. He really emphasizes the time scale.
1,000 years since we settled down versus, what was it, 200,000 years as nomads.
Exactly. And that massive stretch of nomadic life, he argues, is what wired us for so many of the behaviors we see today. It's like our ancient instincts are still running the show, often unconsciously.
Yeah, especially when it comes to how we consume things, our spending habits.
Right. That long shadow of the past influencing our modern choices.
Okay, so building on that, he makes this distinction. Sound versus unsound consumption. Let's start with the positive sound consumption.
He uses culture as an example, right? Film, music, things we engage with for genuine value.
Yeah, like for inspiration or just pure enjoyment. The key is it's not compulsive and it doesn't really have negative fallout.
So some consumption is actually good for us. It adds something real to our lives.
But then there's the flip side, unsound consumption.
Uh-huh. This is the stuff we do, maybe compulsively, without getting any real lasting benefit. No real joy, no learning, nothing tangible.
The classic example he gives is mindless scrolling, isn't it? Facebook, Instagram, just flicking through.
Oh, yeah. We've all done that.
Yeah,
And afterwards, you often feel nothing. Or maybe even a bit worse.
totally.
Yeah.
That slightly drained feeling. And he points out you probably can't even remember what you just looked at 5 minutes later.
And that lack of recall, maybe even a hint of anxiety or disappointment, it's quite telling.
But he adds a little nuance there, which is important. Not all social media is inherently bad.
Right. He hints there's potential for real connection, valuable stuff too. We might get back to that.
Okay, let's move to something really basic. Food, consuming food.
The primal drive.
Yeah.
From an evolutionary perspective, it's obvious, isn't it?
If you're a nomad and food is scarce, you find calories, you eat them, maximize intake.
Absolutely. Survival depended on it. Eat while you can, store that energy.
But that same instinct in today's world, where food is everywhere.
It becomes a massive challenge. That's a big part of the modern obesity issue, he argues. Our bodies are still yelling, eat, store fat. But the environment's totally different.
He even mentions that famous marshmallow test, Walter Mischel, 1972.
Oh yeah, the kids in delayed gratification. Eat one now or wait and get two later.
And the correlation they found later in life with things like obesity, substance abuse, it's pretty striking. It really highlights how fundamental that ability to delay gratification is.
It really does. That impulse control, or lack thereof.
And industries know this, don't they? They exploit these deep-seated instincts.
Oh, absolutely. Fast food companies, sugary snack makers.
Yeah.
They're experts at hitting those primal buttons. High calories, instant reward. It's almost like they're hacking our evolutionary wiring.
Right. Now, he goes into another area, maybe a bit more controversial, pornography consumption, looking at it through that same evolutionary lens.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. He talks about early human societies, often polygamous in nature.
And the role of matriarchal control within those groups.
Planning mating. He suggests the older, more experienced women often guided these things, initiated the rituals.
And once those rituals started, from a male evolutionary perspective, the drive was to mate frequently, maximize the chances of passing on genes.
A powerful biological imperative, basically.
So fast forward to now, internet pornography, it's just
Right.
everywhere, always available.
And the scale is just completely different from anything our ancestors experienced. He calls it a reinforcement mechanism on overdrive.
Instead of limited opportunities, it's an endless stream, constant stimulation.
And the core idea is that our brains, which evolved in that older context, just aren't equipped for this level of constant, readily available sexual stimuli.
It creates this feedback loop, particularly, he suggests, in the male brain. That drive is constantly being triggered by this digital availability.
It's a provocative thought, our ancient wiring struggling with modern digital realities. He also touches on potential differences between men and women here, too.
Yeah, linking it back to who initiated things ancestrally. Women perhaps more tied to biological cycles, men more reactive to signals of availability.
Possibly. Which might explain, he suggests, why some men might engage with it almost habitually, even without strong desire, just because the stimulus is there, that primitive brain response again.
But then the crucial question, why isn't this leading to constant harmful behavior if the drive is so strong?
And he stresses the power of social norms, cultural rules. They act as incredibly strong inhibitors.
Often stronger than the urge itself, he argues, essential for keeping society functioning.
But online, in private, those social checks and balances can be absent, which might allow those drives to operate more freely.
Okay, shifting slightly. He connects social media use to gambling addiction. How?
Through intermittent reinforcement. Skinner's experiments with mice back in the 30s.
Right, the unpredictable rewards. That's the key.
Exactly. If a mouse gets food sometimes, but not always when it presses a lever.
It goes crazy pressing the lever, right, because it never knows when the reward is coming.
Precisely. That uncertainty creates compulsive behavior. And he argues this same psychological mechanism fuels a lot of human behavior, including addiction.
You see it so clearly with gambling, slot machines, betting. It's all about that, maybe.
Yeah, that possibility of a win, even a small one, keeps you hooked.
Yeah.
Keeps hope alive, like the mouse hoping for the next food pellet.
Then he does this interesting thought experiment about the word addiction. Should we always pathologize it? Treat it purely as a disease.
He uses the simple itch analogy, a mosquito bite. You know, scratching too much is bad, but that immediate relief is hard to resist.
It highlights that spectrum, doesn't it? From a minor compulsion to something really destructive. Where's the line between healthy and sick?
And he raises a good point. Labeling everything an illness can sometimes reduce personal responsibility, maybe push towards pharmaceutical solutions too quickly. It's complex.
Okay, another fundamental drive. Group cohesion. Belonging. And its flip side, intergroup conflict.
Back to survival. Protecting your own group. Being wary of outsiders that had clear evolutionary advantages. Stick together. Defend your turf.
We're inherently wired for in-group loyalty and out-group suspicion, to some degree.
And he brings in Dunbar's number here, about 150.
Yeah, the supposed cognitive limit for maintaining meaningful social relationships. You can't truly know thousands of people.
Right, and he connects this idea of social development to how kids play.
Play as practice for adult life. Learning social rules, cooperation, even conflict resolution. He notes that those gender differences, too. Boys may be simulating more conflict, girls more social negotiation.
Interesting observation. And then rites of passage ceremonies, graduations.
They mark that transition, right? Taking those learned skills to the wider adult world, contributing to the group.
And sports, competitions. He sees those as controlled outlets for our competitive, sometimes aggressive adult drives.
A safe way to play out those instincts. Structured conflict.
But sometimes, maybe even that's not enough for our deeper urges for risk or intensity.
Yeah, he looks at our fascination with risk, cites things like ancient Mesoamerican ball games, sometimes ending in sacrifice.
Or Roman gladiators. Pretty extreme stuff.
And how does this connect to today? Digital games.
Ah, yes. They offer that simulation of high-stakes scenarios, life or death, but without the actual physical danger. You get the adrenaline, the challenge.
But the potential downside. He points to dependence, maybe detachment from reality, using games to fulfill needs that aren't being met elsewhere.
And again, those gender preferences in games often echo the childhood play patterns.
Right. Okay, that brings us to the next big section. The elite leading the sheep, the real winners.
He starts with a historical overview of hierarchies. Feudalism, nobility, peasants,
Yeah.
then the Industrial Revolution.
And Marxist proletariat, the working class, selling their labor to survive.
But then, the big shift he focuses on is towards the consumtariat, a term from Bard and Soderfist.
The idea being that as tech, AI, robots take over production, the main economic role for many people becomes consuming, not producing.
It's a fundamental shift from a society focused on making things to one focused on buying things.
And this has a global dimension too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He points out how often it's proletariats in developing countries making the cheap goods for the consumtariat in the West to buy.
He uses the porn industry again here as a stark example of a self-sustaining consummariat.
Minimal marketing needed, right? Because the drive is so internal, so biological. Once people start, they often just keep consuming.
Then he turns to influencers and the halo effect.
That psychological quirk where if we like someone for one thing, maybe they're attractive or funny, we assume they're good at other things too, like knowing which products are best.
Which is marketing gold, obviously.
Yeah.
Our admiration gets transferred, and suddenly we trust their recommendations.
And he breaks down how someone might become an influencer. Starts with passion, builds an audience.
Then the companies come knocking, hey, promote our stuff, we'll pay you.
And even if Call, his example influencer, starts with good intentions, the dynamic can shift. They end up needing to maintain that audience, keep them consuming. They create their own little consummariats.
The example of athletes pushing gambling sites really drives it home. Huge profits for the few, potential harm for the many consumers.
It's a stark power imbalance. And he compares it to old tobacco marketing tactics.
Using doctors as trusted figures back then, and shifting focus to developing countries when the West caught on to the health risks. Chilling.
It really shows the long history of using psychology and influence for commercial gain, which leads him to Edward Bernays.
Freud's nephew, the father of PR, he took Freud's ideas about unconscious desires.
And applied them directly to marketing. How to tap into what people really want, even if they don't know it themselves.
The Torches of Freedom campaign is just classic Bernays, isn't it?
Linking smoking for women to female empowerment. Absolutely brilliant in a manipulative way. Sales soared.
And the cake mix thing. Just adding the instruction, add an egg.
Seems so simple, but Bernays understood it gave the consumer, usually the housewife then, a sense of ownership, participation. I didn't just open a box, I made this cake. Sales went way up. Genius insight into consumer psychology.
Okay, so Bernays had this maybe naive vision of guiding society through propaganda. The author contrasts this with two famous dystopias.
Orwell's 1984, control through fear, surveillance, pain, Big Brother, against the people's will.
And Huxley's Brave New World, control through pleasure, drugs like soma, engineered contentment. People willingly participate.
It's a crucial difference, force versus seduction. And the author suggests modern societies are tending towards one or the other.
Orwellian states, he notes, tend to be unstable. Fear breeds resentment.
But the Huxleyan model, that might be more dangerous long term. If everyone's superficially happy and distracted, who's going to push for real change? Contentment becomes the cage.
And this ties into his point about the knowledge gap in society.
Right. He argues a healthy society needs a relatively small gap in general understanding between different groups. When it gets too wide,
Power imbalances grow. Knowledge is power, after all.
he traces this historically medieval clergy having the knowledge, then the printing press, spreading literacy, then specialized industrial knowledge.
But now, in the digital age, he sees that gap widening dramatically and dangerously.
The anecdote he uses, Lisa, the system architect, and Ollie, the shop assistant, illustrates this so well.
Lisa's skills are in high demand. She designs the systems.
And Ollie loses his job partly because of those systems.
Right.
He ends up dependent on digital consumption games, maybe online gambling, targeted ads, all facilitated by Lisa's work.
She holds this immense indirect power over his life. Ollie becomes the meat robot plugged into her digital world.
The stark picture of this widening divide.
Yeah.
And then the CAPTCHA thing.
Oh, yeah. Clicking, I am not a robot, while actually doing free labor for Google.
Training their AI for self-driving cars by identifying traffic lights and buses.
Yeah.
The irony is just staggering. We become the meat robots helping build the system.
Okay, moving on. Section 3. Everyone is on stage. No one is in the audience.
He starts with the traditional idea of conversation. Back and forth. You talk, I listen, we swap.
But the internet, social media, it enables mass broadcasting, doesn't it?
Yeah, everyone can have a stage.
Mm.
But is anyone really listening in that reciprocal way? Or are we just shouting into the void hoping for applause?
And he connects this performance back to that fundamental need to belong. Ancestral groups, status hierarchies.
Like in those small nomadic groups, your status mattered. You might push boundaries, try to impress, seek validation from the group leaders, the elders.
And getting that nod of approval from the matriarch or patriarch, that was real validation. It registered. You gain status.
So he argues we're doing the same thing online now, showing off our health, our wealth, our good deeds, seeking status.
Posting the perfect workout selfie, the fancy meal, the charity donation.
Exactly. We broadcast these status signals, hoping for likes, comments, shares, the modern equivalent of that tribal validation.
But here's the catch he points out, that online confirmation, it's often superficial. transactional.
It's not the same deep acceptance you'd get from your actual community. It's more like consuming little hits of affirmation.
And that constant need for validation makes us anxious, right?
Yeah.
If the likes drop off, does that mean our social standing has dropped? It links our self-worth to these flimsy metrics.
And it can lead to this weird situation where the appearance becomes more important than the reality.
Faking the gym visit, staging the healthy food photo, just for the online approval. He calls it the shortcut to the shortcut, getting the validation without the actual effort or achievement.
He then makes an interesting cultural point about Scandinavia, particularly Sweden,
This combination of high individualism, focus on self-realization, but also strong collectivism, seeking consensus, wanting group approval.
which makes them, he suggests, almost perfectly primed consumers for social media validation, wanting to be unique but also desperately needing to fit in.
It's a fascinating tension. Then he addresses online negativity trolls, hate.
His take is interesting, not necessarily clinical psychopaths, but
The lack of normal social cues, online body language, tone, plus anonymity. It can allow ordinarily empathetic people to act in ways that seem psychopathic. They don't see the impact.
it detaches the action from the consequence in a way. Then there's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Ah, yes. The less you know, the more confident you are that you know everything.
While the real experts often doubt themselves more. A recipe for online disaster sometimes. Lots of confident ignorance.
He also mentions Peter Pan syndrome in this digital context.
The idea that the internet provides this endless playground, maybe reducing the incentive to fully embrace adult responsibilities, it's easier to stay in that attention-seeking phase.
And that desire for attention, he links it back to very young children's behavior, which platforms now seem to idealize. That halo effect, again, may be applied to youth itself.
Contrasting sharply with traditional societies where elders, the matriarchs and patriarchs, held authority due to lived experience.
Now, you combine Dunning-Kruger with this worship of young influencers.
And you get inexperienced people confidently guiding others, potentially creating this narcissistic spiral with real mental health downsides. He even gives historical examples, young, inexperienced rulers causing chaos.
Okay, section 4. This title is great. You've eaten too much information, and now you have a stomachache.
Yeah. He starts by comparing attention spans now versus, say, the 19th century, the Lincoln-Douglas debates.
People would listen for hours back then. Deep engagement. The media shapes how we pay attention.
Absolutely. And he makes that critical point. Information isn't the same as knowledge. Access doesn't equal understanding.
Our brains are always worrying, thoughts triggering thoughts, stimulated by everything around us.
And that anecdote about trying to peel an orange, it's perfect.
It starts with a simple search, then one link leads to another and another. 20 minutes later, you're reading about something totally random and you've completely forgotten about the orange.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
It shows how easily we get derailed, consuming info without it sticking.
Because, he explains, our brains need to connect information into meaningful chains to store it long term. That's knowledge. Isolated bits just get flushed out.
Memory itself is flawed, he adds. Like that game of telephone, it changes over time.
So in this digital age, it's like a constant battle. Information versus knowledge. Everyone's fighting for our attention through our phones.
In all these constant detours, this fragmented consumption, it turns us into those meat robots again. Full of facts, maybe, but lacking deep understanding.
He uses the food analogy again. Quick info hits are like sugar. Instantly gratifying, but no real nourishment.
While nuanced, complex information is like the healthy salad. Vital, but less immediately tempting in our fast food info culture.
And just like we simplify things for kids, being constantly fed candy info as adults dumbs down our view of the world, makes us dependent. Links it to dopamine hits too.
Our unique human hunger for information, it's our superpower, but also our potential downfall. He talks about trying to read a book with your phone nearby.
Or multitasking while listening to an audiobook. Your attention is divided. You're not really absorbing it deeply.
Those Mueller-Pilchecker experiments from way back in the 1890s showed this. Memory consolidation takes time. Your brain needs to process.
If new stuff comes in too quickly, it interferes. It overwrites what you just learned before it could settle into long-term memory.
And using our phones as external memory, it creates a bad cycle. We don't consolidate info because we know we can look it up again, which makes our long-term memory weaker, making us rely more on the phone.
Short-term memory gets constantly overloaded. Long-term memory suffers.
And finally, he connects the rise in ADHD diagnoses in kids over the last couple of decades.
To this radically changed environment. Constant digital stimulation becomes the baseline. normal for the developing brain.
So when that stimulation drops, like in a quiet classroom, the brain reacts, maybe with restlessness or feeling exhausted because it's deviating from its adapted norm.
Wow. Okay, section 5, provocative title. Throw away yourself against the wall.
Yeah, he starts with that feeling, leaving a shop without buying anything, that vague dissatisfaction or anxiety, shopaholism, consumption dependence.
It's a weird feeling if you've experienced it, like you failed somehow. And he looks at how different generations might perceive this.
The silent generation, knowing scarcity, probably wouldn't get it. Buy what you need, make do.
Baby boomers experiencing rising prosperity, maybe they'd want the specific item but not feel that general urge to buy just anything.
But for younger generations, born into abundance, never knowing scarcity, that feeling might be much more familiar. Buying itself can become a goal, a source of satisfaction.
And our economy relies on this, doesn't it? Constant consumption.
So how do industries stimulate it? Two main ways he discusses: planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence.
Planned, designing things to fail or become unusable after a while. The light bulb cartel example is classic, limiting lifespan deliberately.
Or non-replaceable batteries, printer cartridges designed to run out.
Then perceived obsolescence. The product works fine, but you're made to feel it's outdated, uncool. You need the new version.
Fashion is the ultimate example, isn't it? Driving constant replacement.
His razor example is really telling too. From simple, durable blades
To complex, disposable cartridges locked to specific handles. More profit, way more waste.
and coffee pods, e-cigarettes. Products built around constant repurchase of consumables. Maybe good intentions initially, but the result is more consumption, more waste.
Which leads to the bigger picture. Our linear take-make-dispose model, just generating mountains of waste.
And that double game companies push production consumers consume, often unaware of the full downstream consequences.
The Coca-Cola example is brilliant. Shifting from returnable glass to disposable plastic, then funding Keep America Beautiful campaigns.
Which cleverly put the focus on consumer littering, deflecting attention away from the massive increase in plastic production they initiated. Genius PR move, really. Okay, final section. You don't need to participate in the madness.
He admits people are often skeptical of self-help, but frames this as individual strategies, things you can do.
Starts with the boiled frog idea. Our consumerism creeps up on us so slowly, we don't notice how much we've changed.
So step one is reflection. How much of my consumption is real personal growth, and how much is just being subtly manipulated by marketing?
And the core solution? Find meaning outside of buying stuff.
Develop the superpower of not needing the next shiny thing, resisting that constant pull.
He paints this picture of just letting the marketing barrage wash over you, ignoring the offers, the deals, the pressure.
And he's honest, saying it's a journey for him too. We all consume unconsciously to some extent. He also mentions using some unusual terms.
Like the Latin phrases, not to show off, but to spark curiosity, encourage people to look them up themselves.
Then he breaks down why we overconsume into 4 overlapping reasons. First, fear.
Marketing based on fear of missing out, fear of aging, health scares, security risks. Selling products is the shortcut to avoid bad things.
And against this, he offers amor fati. Love your fate, Nietzsche's idea.
Accepting everything, good and bad. Reduces worry about the future, makes you less vulnerable to fear-based marketing.
The anecdote about Lisa worrying endlessly about finding a partner, spending time and money, it illustrates how much anxiety we invest in future outcomes that might happen anyway. Makes you question your own worries and purchases.
The second strategy, premeditatio malorum. Premeditation of evils.
Basically, deliberately experiencing mild discomfort. Giving up a luxury you take for granted.
Like going barefoot sometimes. Initially uncomfortable, but you learn either that shoes aren't always essential, or you gain a real appreciation for them beyond fashion.
Or taking cold showers. Maybe health benefits, maybe not, but it definitely makes you appreciate warmth. It recalibrates your sense of need versus want, reduces reliance on manufactured comfort.
Third reason for overconsumption, us versus them.
Marketing that creates divisions, vegans versus meat eaters, Mac versus PC, to generate demand by playing on group identity.
Fourth, chasing the ideal. Buying stuff to meet media-driven standards of beauty, as success, whatever.
And finally, just impulse buys, those instinct-driven purchases, tapping into the primal stuff we talked about at the start.
So wrapping it all up, this deep dive has really uncovered some powerful forces, hasn't it? From our evolutionary baggage to super sophisticated digital manipulation, all shaping how we consume.
Yeah, often completely unseen, working away beneath the surface.
Which brings us back to that central question he asks. Do you really know what you're doing, or are you on autopilot? It's something to keep asking yourself.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Building on that last section, you don't need to participate. If true freedom today isn't about acquiring more, but about consciously choosing not to play the game.
Then what happens when you actually step off that consumer treadmill? What other sources of meaning or satisfaction or even just simple joy might you find when you actively resist that constant urge to consume? Something to think about.